What's up, cycling fanatics? We're back with another episode of Pack Chatter. I hope this finds you safe and healthy. We have a really good one for you today. I can't talk enough about how much I enjoyed this conversation. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit about some sponsors, and we even get into this topic in the conversation about how difficult it is to talk about sponsorship and marketing and things right now, and to do so sort of tastefully and responsibly if it's appropriate at all. And I've struggled with that over the last couple of podcasts as we put that out. And I really appreciate Adam's insight on that with the conversation that we'll get to in a moment. I do think that we owe it to the sponsors that have helped us produce this and are continuing to help us produce it right now, to recognize them, though, and to do so in a way that is respectful of everybody's current situation. So I do want to mention a few that have allowed us to continue to help produce these for you right now, and that hopefully in the future, when things are improved or when you're able, we can continue to support these individuals and these companies who have supported us both in the past and are currently supporting us as we continue this podcast. So first, I'd like to mention once again Nut Butter. They've been a long-standing sponsor and supporter of cycling for the last decade in Western New York and even in many different events across the country. They're a well-known, very well-respected company that produces organic peanut butter, almond butter, hazelnut spread, all kinds of phenomenal organic, healthy products. The great fuel for endurance athletes, and they are a really good product right now. You can order them online. They'll come shipped to your house and in a jar that'll last and that you can use for the current situation as you try to limit your store runs and want to have a good supply of healthy food on hand. So please continue to support them as best as possible, both now and in the future, as they've always been great supporters of us. I'd also like to mention Van Bortle Ford as a more Western New York-based company, but as one that has been also a huge supporter of cycling during good times, and when things improve, as I hope they will very soon, I hope we can continue to support that business. I know not everybody's rushing out to buy a brand new car right now, and I'm sure that will happen for a while. But when you are ready and you are at that point, please remember that company has always supported cycling events for a very, very long time. They've supported our gravel events for the last 5 years, and they support other cycling events in our community. I'd also like to mention Castelli. We have a relationship with them and have for the last couple of years. I'm very proud of that relationship. They're one of the best cycling companies in the world and have been around for decades and decades and decades. And we truly appreciate them. And if at any point you're looking to upgrade some of your clothing, or when it's time for you to produce some custom gear again for your team or your club, please make sure that you're looking at Castelli. Lastly, I want to do a little local support here to a business that has supported us for a very long time. And if you're listening to this podcast locally, you can go out and support them as well. And that's Silver Lake Brewing Project in Perry. They're a great brewery, and they have supported us for several years. They're owned and operated by a cyclist. They love cycling. And in this time, you can go out and do curbside pickup and grab some beer from them and help support them and help them keep going in a time where they can't keep their doors open. And I was lucky enough to get some of that as well. I had some Quincy Brown just recently, and it is absolutely delicious. So if you are close enough and able to do so, please keep that in mind and please go out and support that business. All right, so today's conversation was one that I had been hoping to have for a really long time prior to all of this craziness, but certainly one of the first people that I would want to talk to in the cycling world during this. Adam Myerson is an absolute icon on so many levels, whether we're talking about a racer or the work he does with USA Cycling, or we're talking about as an event promoter or a coach in his coaching business, or as an advocate just for humanity all the way around. He is extremely insightful and thoughtful and well balanced on all of that in a really interesting way. And I think at the end of the podcast, he captures it really well, and you can listen to his words and his explanation on it. But it really resonated with me, in part because I think I can relate to it a little bit. But Adam has an interesting balance of being very critical and very analytic analytical, as well as being extremely empathetic. And sometimes when you are very critical and very analytical, as I'm accused of being often, as well, so I kind of understood where he's coming from. Sometimes people mistake that for not being empathetic. They feel sometimes the emotion is lost out of that, I think, so to speak. And I think Adam does a very nice job of bringing that in. And I learned just in this conversation a lot about him, but also a lot about how to kind of balance that and how to keep that empathy at the forefront while also pushing for helping people and doing the right thing and doing the thing that makes the most sense, and always finding ways to improve upon things and not being sort of settling with the way the world is or the way things are, whether we're talking about cycling or otherwise. So I really appreciate that perspective from him. I relate to that perspective a lot, and I learned quite a bit during that. We also jump into just all kinds of different fun topics and serious topics as well. Of course, with COVID-19, we're talking about how that's affecting cycling and our lives, and what's the right thing to be doing in terms of marketing right now. He goes into great depth on that, and I really appreciate that perspective. The way events might look as they come back online, and how to balance those things, and we talk a little bit about that. We get into sort of the old days of road racing, or the former days of road racing, and what that looked like, and how to sort of bring back some of the things that generation of riders really loved, and what's really good about those things that sometimes gets lost in the conversation. And of course, that all kind of gets balanced out with what we're always talking about seemingly in cycling, with gravel. So I really can't say enough about how much I enjoyed the opportunity to talk to Adam. He's somebody who I've wanted to speak with for a very long time, and this conversation was just an absolute pleasure during a really tough time, and so many things that were just swirling as we're going through it, to where I really feel like we could have done another 2 hours if we needed to or wanted to, and hopefully there'll be another time down the road under brighter circumstances where we get to do this again, because I could really talk to Adam all day long and learn from him constantly. So big thanks to him for taking the time to do this, and I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I did. So without anything else from me, please enjoy Adam Myerson.
You'll never go out on a training ride and dig that deep.
Awesome. We won gold.
They're life rides.
I'm like, dude, I'm still figuring this out.
Lose sight of the fact that it's whoever goes faster.
This isn't a road race. This isn't a mountain bike race.
The sensei of sprint, Todd Shesky.
My eyes are coming out of my head. Just get in here.
Well, good. I'm glad we're a special occasion then. So that's awesome. I feel like we got the fine china out now.
If I'm not going to do my own podcast, I at least got to make myself available when other people want to talk to me.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome.
That's awesome. I told Todd, I was like, if there's any cycling figure I want to talk to right now, it's Adam Myerson. I feel like you're going to have some really good insights and some fun stuff. So,
yeah, well, that's why I was happy to do it. I do feel that like I needed an outlet. I was ready to talk. So,
yeah, and hopefully it's just some of it's just to relax a little bit too. We had Powers on a couple weeks ago, like when this was really first starting, and it just like getting in and talking kind of about some normal stuff too, just made everything feel a little bit better for a little while.
Yeah, sure.
What are you doing now as a coach for your athletes? I feel like that's got to be one of the several major hurdles that both you guys are dealing with right now that I was kind of curious about.
As a coach, so I got the two jobs. One is running the coaching business and figuring out how CycleSmart as a company is going to respond. But of course, a big part of that is how we work with our athletes on an individual basis. You can't really separate those two things out. And so I think there's 10 coaches in the company, and we have weekly meetings, and we've obviously been talking a lot more than we normally do. And we've been talking every week or sometimes every day about our approach here. I think it really varies. I think the first thing that I'll say is the word that I've really been working hard to avoid is the word opportunity. It can be very easy right now when you're trying to make the best of this situation or just evaluate the circumstances to say, well, we've got an opportunity here to do this or that, and every time my brain takes me to the word opportunity, I catch myself. There's no opportunities here. There's only coping. There's only making the best of things. If you are approaching this with the word opportunity in the conversation, then for me that displays a lack of empathy. You are not remembering that people are dying, that people are going to lose their jobs, that things won't be the same. We're not going to go back to normal after this. And so using the word opportunity or thinking in opportunistic terms. I mean, of course, someone always benefits in a tragedy, in a crisis. People are going to make money off this. People are going to come out on top from this, just like they always do, like housing crisis, same thing. So someone's going to make money. But those are evil people, in my opinion. That's not ethical. That's not the kind of person I want to be, and I don't think that's the kind of company that I run or the kind of people that my coaches are. So when we're talking to the athletes, it's about what are their lives, how have their lives changed, if at all. So on one extreme, for my juniors and my college-aged athletes, of which I have about 8, their lives got canceled, basically. They got sent home. School's canceled. Any jobs they have are canceled. They might have some schoolwork at home that they can do, but basically, they also aren't responsible for taking care of themselves. Someone else is paying their rent. Someone else is feeding them. They have a support system in place. So they're basically D3 pros right now.
Right.
They've got no job, no commitments, and they have freedom to ride. And as long as they're in a safe place, like if their parents haven't lost their jobs, as long as they're secure,
Right.
and they're exercising all of the prevention behaviors that they need to, what we don't want is someone to make themselves sick with training and then be exposed to the virus and then be in a situation where they're fighting that off instead. So as long as they're minimizing exposure, training alone, we're being really strict with our athletes. It's amazing to me the people who are still going out for group rides. I think my younger athletes are more willing to train indoors. They've come up in a period of nice trainers and Zwift, and so indoor training for them is easier, I think. So for those athletes, we had to cancel the season, right? Or cancel at least the racing that they were about to do, they didn't get to do. So everybody, no matter who they are, has taken a big step back. We paused, everybody rested, they ended what they were doing, and then we've come up with a plan to either build back up or in some cases maybe just maintain over the next 2 months at a minimum, but maybe 3, with some optimism that maybe we'll be racing in August. Hopefully we'll be racing for the cyclocross season. Best case scenario, maybe we'll be racing in July. But in any of those cases, any plan we make, it comes with an asterisk that this plan will likely change. I think then at the other extreme, some of my athletes' lives have gotten more challenging. Even if they still have work, let's say, maybe they're working from home with a child, they have less time and more stress. And I have one athlete who works in a hospital. So her life right now is, as she put it in a conversation I had with her, she said, I don't feel like I'm training to be a bike racer now. I'm training not to die. Those were her words. And it was very sobering. So she wants to train every day. She needs to exercise. She has to have that as part of her life. But she just wants to hold her level for physical and mental well-being. And her whole life right now revolves around going to work and not getting sick. But she's 100% expecting to be exposed to the virus and to get sick, and she wants to be sort of physically ready for that. And that is, so for athletes like that, we dialed everything back and there's no progression. There's no workload increase. We're just we're keeping the ember lit, so that maybe when we're on the other side, athletes in those circumstances can ramp back up. They're not just not training. Not training would be worse. Not training at all would definitely be worse.
So for somebody like that, you're kind of balancing this idea of I don't want to break her body down too much in the way that I might to make her faster or stronger, because I don't want her to be weak for her job. But at the same time, I want to help keep her fit for her job, right?
Yeah, you can almost think in terms of it's the biggest factor in her plan right now is immune system health and well-being. there's nothing she can do necessarily to prevent herself from being exposed to the virus, overtrained, undertrained, whatever. Like the virus is in the air, you're not going to stop that. But if she gets sick, um, there's no reason for her to be immunosuppressed in the first place, and perhaps have a worse case of being sick. And there's conflicting information coming out where the reports are saying, immune system health doesn't matter at all, and others saying immune system health is really crucial. But from her perspective, what she's seeing, who's dying are immunosuppressed people. Who are getting it are the ones who are dying. So that is what she wants to be prepared for. And she's a doctor. I'm a cycling coach. So I actually, if you're ever going to take input from an athlete,
Right.
Right.
right?
I think
right
there's
now,
there's a couple. You touched on kind of two things that I wanted to make sure we didn't get too far away from. And one was the kind of the first part was that impact part when you talk about, like people's lives have basically been canceled, right? Kristen Diefenbach did a really cool presentation for our group about basically treating this as loss for people. And I think that is an important aspect because as much as it's, and I know we've all gone around with, it's just bike racing. It is. But it's more than that too, and it's people had goals and things people have been working for already, coming through the winter, looking forward to spring, and getting on that progression, and it's loss. And so dealing with it as a loss thing and how people deal and cope with that is from that aspect, and then kind of bringing that forward to like talking to your doctor athlete that she's had not only that loss. But then also trying to cope with it as from a job thing and giving her that mental outlet of still having something to do on the bike and getting that escape from everything is about this virus pandemic right now, and being able to step away from that and having somewhere in her life that there's some control over what she's doing and not have to be directly dealing with the direct outfall of dealing with a pandemic.
yeah, that's right. I think our approach at CycleSmart is definitely. All my coaches have different backgrounds and different strengths and weaknesses, and that's what's nice about having a team of coaches that collaborate and work together. We all bring something different to the table, but I think it flows from a place of empathy and a lot of life coaching to begin with. It doesn't matter how good of a exercise scientist you are if you can't hear the sound of fatigue in your athlete's voice on a phone call. So you have to be able to do that work too. And I think that work is especially critical right now. And you're right that it's just stupid bike racing, right? And we can joke that, yes, part 2 of that quote is that it means everything. But the part 3 of that quote that I didn't add till later is it doesn't always mean anything at all. It's not actually that important in the grand scheme of things sometimes. And so, we have to go back to that and think about why it's important. And it's important for, physical and mental health and well-being. The bike racing is the reason some of us get out the door. We love bike racing and we train because we love bike racing. This is a good opportunity for people to think about, without the bike racing, what's the joy that you get from riding your bike every day, indoors or outdoors, or from daily exercise that helps you cope. I posted on my Facebook page, Jeff Grosso had a heart attack apparently earlier this week. And not everybody might know, but he's a professional skateboarder, just a couple years older than me. And, he's a dad, he's a single dad, divorced dad, who like lots of us just use skateboarding to manage his own demons and his own mental health and well-being. And he talks a lot in this clip that I posted about if he doesn't get to roll every day, even if it's just a mile down the store to buy a beer and back, he's not prepared to cope with the rest of his day. And for me, that's, cycling, not just bike racing, but daily training, goal setting, incremental, progressive training, watching my body change, being disciplined with things. Those are the things that you get from bike racing. And so making sure that your athletes have that right now, even if you're on the front lines of the pandemic, like one of my athletes is, and we have other athletes who are as well. she needs to come home and be able to ride her bike to be able to go back to work again the next day. And so that's a lot of what we're doing right now, is providing that kind of support for people.
So from a business perspective, you talked about, you kind of touched on this when we started, about people being opportunistic and sort of finding ways to make money or profit off of this. But I think then the other extreme is to kind of just put your head down and sort of hope it goes away. This is just a bad thing that'll go away in a couple of weeks, and we won't really plan for the way things are going to potentially change forever out of it, or at least change long term out of it. And I see lots of institutions and businesses well outside of cycling kind of playing with both ends. And certainly I feel like I'm in one of those dynamics right now in my job. But with your business, how do you strike a balance between, okay, this is not about opportunity, but it is a place where I have to see how can we continue to evolve with not only what we're dealing with in front of us, but the way this may last for maybe forever in terms of how we see things.
Yeah, there's some paradox in it, right? So my favorite messaging is no messaging. My favorite marketing is sincerity. I think it's important for us to just be ourselves in an open way, and do good work for people and express the things that we're feeling honestly, and let people know that we're here for them. We don't know what to expect. Like, we know that some of our clients, some of our athletes are going to lose their job, and some of them are going to get sick. And those people aren't going to be able to pay for coaching, right? Like, but we want to be there for those folks. So what we've done as a business is, for people that we know are experiencing some hardship right now, we're keeping them on as athletes. If they need support still and they can't pay, that's fine. We're going to take care of those athletes for a while, and we want to be here for them when they come back. In terms of marketing right now, I am so offended by so much of the distasteful marketing that I'm seeing, generally, but even within the coaching profession right now, where people are marketing like training plans built around the virus with Corona or COVID-19, like in the name of the plan that they're trying to sell. If you're selling a training plan with COVID-19 in the name, I think you're doing something wrong. I'm angry about that. I have a real problem with that. If you're in your marketing talking about crushing this virus or crushing your training during the downturn, like, man, no one's crushing anything right now. People are worried about their loved ones living or dying. And you're talking about like crushing things or coming back from the virus like stronger than ever. Like, shut up. Like, I'm mad. I'm really, really, it's actually hard for me not to express how angry I am about that as I talk to you about it now. I'm so deeply offended by that. There's something really, really wrong with that. And it means that those businesses are focused on the wrong things, in my opinion, and they're more interested in making money than doing good work. So,
do you think that comes from a lack of a greed, or does that come from a lack of understanding of how serious this is? Like, we talked a little about comparing this in our lifetimes to maybe 9/11. Would you have seen something using 9/11 in that sort of capacity, the 9/11 training plan? Like I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like we saw that or would have seen that in the same way we're seeing it with this. Like, is it because we're greedier, or is it because we're just not really wrapping our heads around what's happening?
Yeah, sure. Why not both, right? I mean, I don't want to exactly psychoanalyze my competitors, even though I have strong feelings about it. I want to leave space for people to, whatever experience they're having or how they're interpreting things. But I think it's similar to what we said at the beginning. I'm not sure if we were recording, if we were just chit-chatting at that point. But, there's people have different opinions about the virus based on the news that they consume and their political position, and how informed they are, and whether they're skeptics or whether they're libertarians or if they're socialists. Like, those are perhaps political positions, but they come from how you care about and treat other people versus yourself. If you're taking an Ayn Rand approach to things, then maybe you're gonna do some heavy marketing around the virus right now. I don't know, but it can be both, sure. But in either case, it's bad. If people are being dismissive of it, or again, if they're thinking about this as an opportunity, I just think there's a real lack of empathy in that. And that's whatever they want to do it's fine. That's not our style. That's not the kind of people that we are. That's not the kind of coaching company you are. And those aren't the kind of athletes that even we want to attract, you know? So again, from the business standpoint, we're trying to be here for our athletes because these are relationships and we want to maintain those relationships, whether those people are in a position to pay. It breaks my heart, and I do not want to be in a position where I tell someone that they can't hold on to an important relationship because of their financial situation right now. The flip side of that is I am running a business. I have a mortgage to pay too, as do my coaches. And so we just don't want to send out any marketing or do any advertising right now that is anything other than, hey, how are you doing? We are here. We can get through this together. You know, if you need help, let us know. That's about as much marketing as I personally can stomach. Everything else beyond that feels distasteful to me.
One thing in this part of our discussion is that something that I've always appreciated about you, Adam, is one is that you're never afraid to speak your mind, which I think Ed pretty much universally everybody would say, yep, Adam will definitely tell you what he thinks. But I also appreciate and I think as a good balance is you give other people some space. Even if you say, look, I don't necessarily agree with some of the things that are going on, but people may have other reasons for why they do. I don't want to adopt those. And looking at different approaches, and kind of what we were talking about before is how people cope with things and where people may see things, and it may be different depending on. I mean, you're in obviously a much more population dense area, and I think you feel it sharper. You have an athlete that's working in healthcare in a population dense area. It's a much sharper result, more direct result as somebody lives perhaps further out. Their perspective is, I don't even know anybody that has this thing. There's like nobody in my county that has it. It's just some distant thing that's hard to wrap my head around. I don't really see anything happening.
Yeah.
So a lot of those things, like you start talking about, like, yeah, what shapes our view of it. I know I've been slow to come on board with it, right? I mean, we raced the track provincials in Canada the first week of March. Like
Right.
everybody traveled there because it was like, yeah, there's this thing that's kind of going on, but we'll just not have a lot of contact and everything will be great. And then it was like 5 days later, this thing explodes into nobody's going anywhere.
Yeah, even like a half a day later. I think so. So taking that, I think that's really important. Those first couple weeks, the things accelerated both in terms of the virus itself, but also our knowledge, our understanding, and the news of the seriousness. Where I've been saying this repeatedly, like you wake up in the morning with a set of information, and you make decisions based on what you know at that point, and it seems reasonable. And by the time you were going to bed that night, those decisions were completely unreasonable. And the next day, that you would make a different decision based on how things had changed or what you learned that day. I think like the Mid-South gravel race is a great example of that. Like that week leading up to that event is when things really transformed quickly, to the point where like my wife had a 10-day photography retreat planned in Mexico that she'd been planning for months and months. Like she'd been accepted to a program that she was going to, and it was a big trip for her that we had planned. And I was going to go to Austin, Texas with Flynn and put him in a drop-in daycare there and just kind of live our normal life, but do that in a warm place. Since it was just me and him for 10 days, we were going to go there for a week. And she left for Mexico Wednesday morning. Thursday, I canceled my trip to Austin. So like we made a decision Tuesday night that it still seemed where she was going, there weren't reported. Like we were still making the mistake of thinking a lack of reported cases was reflective of whether or not the virus was there or people were actually sick. So she went to Oaxaca because we were like, you'll be fine in Oaxaca. But then by Thursday, I was like, I'm not getting on a plane with my child to go somewhere warm. Of course not. And by Friday, I was messaging her saying, you need to get home. Like, you need to get home like before you can't get home. And she did. She came home as soon as possible. And I think they were facing that same thing in Oklahoma from Mid-South, but made the unfortunate mistake of going forward. But, Monday and Friday, we lived in different worlds,
Yeah.
24 hours later sometimes.
Yeah, I was following what you were saying about Mid-South, and I appreciate how vocal you were there. Do you feel like that they had enough information before that event to have made a different decision?
Um, I think my complaint or my problem with what happened there, viewing it obviously from the outside, not being on the ground, was they for sure the county didn't cancel on them, right? Or the town didn't. If they followed their government recommendations, they were not being told to cancel. And that is, as a race organizer, event organizer, that's a reasonable standard to take. Like how as an event organizer, how are you an expert on public health? You're not. Of course you're not. You have to rely on your government or your experts to tell you what to do. And I think during the week they did make an attempt to do that. I think my real problem was uh, they said one thing and did another, and then in the aftermath, in the days, in the weekend of the event, and in the week after the event, the storytelling around the event, the position that they took about how they soldiered on in the face of adversity, and they ran the event in spite of the virus, and they really like acted like they were heroes saving cycling, and you can see that in there. It's about the storytelling. My evaluation is the storytelling. If they had, like, for instance, canceled their pre-event parties, or there were so many things that they said that they were going to do that they didn't do, and there was so much social distancing that they were not doing when the rest of the country had made a decision to behave in a certain way. They sort of flaunted it and waved it in our faces, and then continued to do that for the week after. And it was like they doubled down on a bad decision. That is what really, and then it kept getting put in my face. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't that I went looking for it. It was that I could not avoid it. And every
Right.
time it would come up in my social media of like Mid-South saving cycling from the evil empire of traditional road racing, and when doing that in the face of the virus, I was like, fuck you guys, man.
Right. Yeah, it was almost, I hate to keep bringing it back to it, but it was almost like the terrorist sort of reaction of we won't let them change our way of life kind of a
Yeah,
thing,
right,
instead of
right.
going like, hey, people might die because you had to have this event. Like this is how a virus works versus how a terrorist works, right? It's not the
That's right. It,
same threat, right?
it was not a punk rock response. It was a libertarian response, but I felt like they marketed it as a punk rock response. That's the vibe that they were putting out. But what I saw was self-interested libertarianism in their storytelling. I don't want to talk about the individual people. I don't know the event organizer, and by all accounts, like, he's a kind, thoughtful, caring person who really cares about people. And I don't know him. I can't criticize him. What I know is the storytelling. What I see is the social media and the messaging that they're sending out around the actions that they took. And that's all I have to go on. And that's what I'm critiquing, or let's not even critiquing. That's what I'm responding to, because that's what's being presented to me. We kept
See,
everybody home. We kept our coaches home. We kept our athletes home. One of my coaches was running a race in West Virginia that weekend. He canceled his event. Like, we did act around that, and we kept people out of the event.
yeah, and there's an interesting part of this, and when you talk about the storytelling part of it, and we look at like, how our like you brought up, how our responses change from morning till even evening based on information, right? And it was like I said, we were up racing. I mean, everybody from the Northeast was up racing the provincials up in Milton, the first weekend of March. And how our responses change quickly. And I think there's part of the storytelling thing that gets interesting is with social media and basically the kind of the permanent capture of responses, and where people basically you're not allowed to grow and to change. And I don't know what part of that plays into their storytelling when they keep going forward with it. Maybe part of it is like, well, I've already been on this path and now I kind of don't want to go back because, well, the string is all there, right? Anybody can go back through the string of tweets or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
so maybe it kind of reinforces people like, well, I am going to kind of double down because I've kind of taken this position of like, we're beating the virus, we're going forward, we're not going to be daunted by this thing. And then I haven't been allowed to grow and say, well, I got new information and my perspective has changed. I mean,
Yeah.
because I know my perspective has changed a lot in the last couple of weeks because I went from, I'm racing my bike and everything's awesome to, I don't know if I'm going to be doing Masters track at the end of June. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm working from home. I'm working remote now. And so a lot of things have changed over the last 3 weeks. And if you went back to like maybe something I would have tweeted or Facebooked or something at the end of February would be quite different now.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I think that's right. I think that, and I think I would have been if their storytelling had changed. I think that was where a lot of the, like for instance, um, the town of Stillwater declared a state of emergency on Monday. I think anyone who's following this knows this story. So the event's on Saturday. They're having like pre-event parties on Friday night, and then they did cancel the things that were going on Sunday, and then Monday they declare a state of emergency. So that lets you know that things were bad when the event was going on, and we know that people who went to the event are sick. Just through friend contacts and conversations, I just keep hearing stories about people who went to the event who are sick now. So yeah, 2020 hindsight, we can say that running the event was a bad idea. Was it fine for him to run it with the information that he had on Friday? Yeah, that's a tough call, and it's not so much that I blame them for running the event, but I think you're hitting it right, and there was room there for their storytelling to change, for there to be some I don't know, some humbleness, some modesty, some recognition of the seriousness of the situation. I think that's what offended me most. The lack of acknowledgement of the seriousness of the situation. It does not look, Mid-South social media did not look that different to me from the video of the spring breakers in Miami. They looked the same to me.
So
Right.
with that experience, then I'm really curious to know sort of, obviously there's a lot of factors on how this works, but as we look to get events back online, whenever that is, so maybe we're really lucky and in July or June, we can start looking at bringing some events back. Like, how do we do that responsibly, knowing what we experienced with that?
Well, it's funny. I literally just yesterday did the permitting for our cyclocross camp, which is the first weekend of August. And there was some debate within the company about whether we should bother going forward with that. Now, it's not that expensive to file a non-competitive event permit, and so it's sort of office work that I needed to get done at some point. I've had a exceptional amount of inquiries for cross camp this year, which is just not what I was expecting, but I think people are already looking past where they think we'll be beginning to get back to normal and doing the things that we love doing, and people are thinking about cross. And so people started thinking about camp, and I just started getting messages, and I was like, okay, like going back to what I said at the beginning of the call, I am not about to send out a press release about cross camp. This is not the environment that I want to market to people about things that are going to happen like after they're done dealing with family members who might die, right? Like it makes me sick to my stomach to like even think about trying to talk in that context. But I do still have to go to my desk every day and do work, and it's a thing that I had to get done. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna file the permit and open registration so that it's done for people who want it. It's making them feel better to sign up for it. I think it's giving them something to look forward to. Fine, like I'll do that. I can give people their money back without any difficulty, and it's not going to cost me much. Again, like that non-competitive event permit's like $50 or whatever.
Right.
And for the people who've inquired, I'll let them know that it's open. And of course, I guess now I'm on a podcast saying that it's open. That wasn't my point. I'm trying to tell a story here, but and so for me, that's how to answer your question. Like in practice, what I'm doing is I'm still trying to make my best guess about when we might get back to some kind of normal bike racing, like public competitive event, or even non-competitive event, like group activity. August seems reasonable today to pin some hope on, without being incredibly attached to it. We'll talk about this later, but I've been talking about how coaching is like an exercise in Buddhist detachment right now, because you're making plans around things that you cannot you can't rely on or remain attached to. But you have to keep moving forward, and being willing to let those deadlines move out. So I I don't want to do any marketing around it. I want to kind of act as normal as feels comfortable. I think other organizers, well, and of course, the next big event I have to run is in mid-November. I do have a lot of time for that, but for Victoria Series stuff, if everything happens, I have 2 Victoria Series races, or New England Northeast Cyclocross Series races. Title sponsor is going to change for this year. Victoria stepped down. I gotta start changing my habit there. But so Northeast Cyclocross Series UCI races in September. I'll have some work to do around that, but I think we know every day we know more. Every day the situation changes, and I hope that we'll have. I guess the best way to say it is put the pieces in place so that you can turn the lights on quickly if we're allowed to go forward. But I think that's about the most you can do, and do not become emotionally attached to the planning that you're doing, because you're gonna get depressed if you.
And that's going to have to be really strategic with things like your cross races as opposed to the camp, because obviously there's a lot more expenses and you can get in a lot deeper on money that you can't recover, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so like that balance when you're looking at those bigger events. And then I guess the other little fear or curiosity I have with that is some of these spring events that are trying to now grab summer or fall dates so that they can still hold their event, and how that affects you guys who are always a fall date. So let's say in November we're back, but you got all these other events that are now trying to reschedule from the spring, and just dividing people and hurting the expenses and hurting those events that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the first weekend of October right now. That's the Trek World Cup weekend. Sea Otter has moved to that weekend. Winston-Salem Criterium has moved to that weekend, I think. Absolutely, that's going to be an issue. I have this inkling that cross is going to be very big this fall, because people who didn't get to race this summer will still have that itch to race. There's just this little bit of buzz that I'm feeling. And so, again, it's not an opportunity, and I don't want to get my hopes up about it, but it is a thing that I'm a feeling that I have based on the like just the little bit of buzz, the conversations I'm having, the things that people are looking forward to. But yeah, I mean, if the Tour de France happens in September, how does that impact, September cyclocross? I mean, it won't maybe for the Europeans, but what makes me also think about is, like, we used to race road until mid-October, like Tour de Park on Long Island, I feel like was October 15th. I think that was the name of that event we used to do.
Oyster Bay. Remember Oyster Bay?
Yeah. I won the last edition of Oyster Bay, but we would race cross the day before, and then Oyster Bay, it'd be a cross race on Saturday and Oyster Bay on Sunday. Yeah, it's like people forgot that we used to race road into October. And I think that's in part because people are excited about cross and they want to switch to cross, and more riders consider cross their primary discipline. But there's going to be a lot of changes that are happening right now that might stick when this passes. Working from home, so many big businesses were resistant to let employees work from home, and now when you see how productive people actually can be working from home, it's going to be very hard to go back to dragging everybody into the office. And maybe the same thing will happen with racing. Like, people will start to realize that September, even as a cyclocross rider, and I want to race cross in September, there's no reason for us not to be still racing road, in September and October, assuming there's bike racers who want to race.
Yeah, and I think that, personally, because I'm not a big cross. Right. Well, I raced cross back in 1989, my only season that I raced cross. So went out to Milwaukee and got my butt kicked at nationals in '89. But
I did that. I did that race. Yeah,
did
yeah,
you?
yeah. In the waterfront, the lake shore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Bob Miansky was there, and Don Meyer. Like, it was like the mountain bike road clash came together because cyclocross was so kind of in its infancy. Yeah. Remember the mud down in the bottom that you couldn't. I mean, you just had to run through like knee deep mud.
Yeah. I've posted pictures since of that ditch. It's all been improved. So yeah, it was just it's like drainage that went through there. It was just runoff basically, but you couldn't run that course anymore. That whole thing has been improved into an actual, like, engineered ditch that the water goes through and into the lake.
So well, they so we'll say quote improved, but it took
Yeah,
away
yeah. Took the course away.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But as somebody like I used to enjoy doing like covered bridges race in Pennsylvania in late September, early October, and um, there were some really, really classic, great road races, Oyster Bay Crit, and man, there was a bunch of them downstate in New York and all over, and even Rhode Island. The names escape me. The big crit they had there, and I think it's gone now.
Yeah.
But there were so many. So in some way, I kind of long for like, man, what happened to our late season? There were some really great races that kind of went away, and then we've pushed cross almost up into August now. I was like, man, I've always kind of maybe just because I'm old and been doing this. This is my 35th race season, right? So I look at it like maybe it's just because it's a bygone time and things have changed. But I would like to see some of that maybe kind of change back a little bit. And but to that same end, gravel being kind of the new kid on the block, and now all these gravel races canceled. It's going to be there could be a potential real kind of clash and dilution, if you will, of riders come fall if everybody's trying to like pack the calendar.
And there aren't any riders, right? Yeah. Delusion works too.
Yeah.
That's you're not wrong. No, either way,
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah, well, so one of the things that the virus has done is it's made us forget, or at least momentarily stop worrying or arguing about the things that we were stressed about ahead of time. Remember that we were in the middle of the Democratic primary?
Yeah.
But also we were in the middle of a crisis in traditional road racing in terms of growth of the sport and number of riders, and we were experiencing or observing this boom in gravel and trying to understand why that was happening. And for those of us who love traditional road racing too, trying to figure out like, okay, how do we grow the sport again? And I think it's interesting because I certainly never want to be, despite our earlier conversation, like I love gravel racing. I'm a cyclocross rider. I love dirt roads. I lived in Western Massachusetts for 12 years. All we did was ride dirt roads. And it can sometimes seem for those of us who've been around for a long time who are observing the growth of gravel and who witnessed the same thing with the growth of mountain biking, we have a long view, and it's easy for us to raise an eyebrow or even roll our eyes occasionally at some of the things that are happening because we've observed it before. We've seen these patterns before. We know that history repeats itself, and we were around for the history the first time around in other ways. And I just had a conversation. It's a feeling that I've been having a while, and I finally voiced it to someone in a conversation on Facebook where Bevan Quinn, who is previous owner of the West Hill shop in Putney, Vermont, his dad ran the Putney Road Race, which in the 80s when I started racing was one of the biggest, and it was a classic New England road race. And I recalled racing on dirt in Putney Road Race. A big feature of the Putney Road Race were the dirt sections. And I asked him that to remind me, like, am I wrong about that? And he's like, no, absolutely. We had dirt sections. Like, right. So this is a point that I've been making is we have been racing gravel for a long time, and classic grassroots, particularly in New England, but I think everywhere. Road racing used to be these very low key, inexpensive to run, not particularly safe or well marshaled road races in these semi-rural places like southern Vermont or western Massachusetts. And those races went away. They went away in the 90s when everything got expensive. Cops got expensive, safety requirements went up, insurance costs went up. The world got a little more complicated, and we lost those events. And, alongside of that, we lost clubs, and there are lots of changes that happened too. One of the things that I see happening with gravel is it's replacing those lost events. It's the reason we loved the Putney Road Race. It's the same reason we love like Paris to Ancaster in Toronto is an event that I really, really love as an example. And that's of course, maybe that's not the best example because that event's been around for 30 plus years too, and is a classic unto itself. But some of these newer gravel events, are recreating that experience that I think we were having in the 80s and 90s in these low key, let's say low safety, low stake road races that were, inexpensive to enter. Of course, that's not true of gravel. Gravel is not inexpensive to enter, but
No.
it brings back some of that, completing the course, whether you get dropped or not, is still enjoyable. It's still a fulfilling experience. And I think gravel right now is sort of getting away with a lack of safety that road racing is no longer allowed to get away with. And I think if they're not insuring with USA Cycling, I also think there's a lack of insurance coverage that people don't realize when they register for them. And there's going to be a reckoning. I think gravel is going to have to address this at some point. I think people are going to die, and it's only going to take a couple of deaths and a couple of lawsuits for gravel to no longer be able to get away with the lack of safety in terms of like course marshaling and course direction. A pack of riders is going to get smoked, and that happened in road racing, and that was a big reason why we lost a lot of races. Was there were deaths. Cars hit packs of riders and people died. So it's only a matter of time before I see that in gravel. Now, bringing that back around, if I'm occasionally critical of some of what I'm seeing in the growth of gravel, it's not because I'm anti-gravel, because I love it and our athletes are doing it and I want to participate in it. I just hate to see them repeating mistakes or acting like they've come with new ideas or that they're saving something that's a counter to what currently exists. Or that, for instance, like traditional road racing does not have to be unwelcoming.
Right. Yes, I agree with you so much on that. Like I hear that so often, like everything that looks a little bit like road racing, if it comes into gravel, people freak out. And it's like road racing didn't get everything wrong forever. Like there's things there that work, there's things that are enjoyable, there's things there that can enhance a gravel race depending on what kind of gravel race you're throwing. I think part of the risk factor you're talking about is I think it's ridiculous that all these races are 200 miles, 100 miles. I mean, that's fine for some people, but that's also why I think you have marshal issues, because how are you marshaling 200 miles?
Well, even a 50-mile event, if they're saying we're not going to put up signs and you have to rely on self-navigation.
Right.
Then
there's no support on the course and just go.
Yeah, or even if the support is like food stops, but if there aren't marshals at every corner, there's not even signage, so you can't count on a marshal. Well, take a wild guess of what happens with a bunch of 40 plus white guys who are living their best life out there come up on that corner in a pack where they're trying to stay with the pack and like are paying attention to the wheel in front of them and are a little bit caught up in their own racing experience and maybe their own ego. I've made that mistake. I did a gravel race last year where I was in a pack. We were going hard. We came up on a turn. I was familiar where we were and I was following the guy in front of me and I forgot myself for a second. And we came around the turn and there was a car coming. And I had that moment where I was like, oh shit, I fucked up. I'm about to die. I'm going to get killed. And I managed to keep turning and get myself into the ditch. But there was an amount of safety that I'm accustomed to. If I felt like I was on it's the same kind of behavior you see on the weeknight worlds type group rides where people are blowing stop signs and red lights to ride in the group and they're prioritizing, their workout or their experience over safety. The reason why you pay an entry fee, especially in the USA Cycling sanctioned race, you're kind of paying for a certain amount of safety, a closed course, a course marshal. There's some things that you expect. And I think gravel isn't promising that. Gravel is saying the opposite. They're saying, hey, these turns aren't marshaled. You're responsible for your own safety. It's like expecting you. But that's not what happens in reality. People start racing and they forget themselves.
And if you can forget yourself with the amount of experience that you have, that can be done with anybody. And I think that's a really good message, because on top of the ego and anything else that does it, sometimes it's just fatigue, right? Sometimes you
make a bad decision,
your limits, right? You can't think clearly. I mean, that's part of the process. And I think you're right on the marshaling and on all those kind of things. And the races that we put on, we always we do that, but we keep everything really short so we can do that. Our races are 45 miles, so we can marshal the corner, so we can have neutral support. And we actually get criticism sometimes for that. It's not it's not wild enough, so to speak. It's not long enough, or we shouldn't have. We took a beating in Cyclocross Magazine last year, and nothing against Cyclocross Magazine. It wasn't really them. They just posed the question. But because we had neutral support at the gravel races, and they're like, that's not gravel. You can't have neutral support.
I saw that.
Like,
I saw that.
I'm
Yeah.
like, come on, man. Like it's helping people finish a race that they paid an entry fee for.
And everyone loves your events, right? Like I only see positive things about your events. Like,
I appreciate that.
so yeah, I mean, like maybe it's a little dangerous to talk about bat and kill because we know like that summons the monsters, right? But I loved bat and kill. It was my favorite race. I focused on it. I prepared for it. It meant everything to me. And I felt like it was a road race where no climb was longer than 5 minutes. It was just within what I could do as a sprinter. I could train for it. I could diet. I could do the intervals. And so I had success there because then when we would get to the dirt sections, I could use my skills to make up for what I lacked in threshold power compared to some of the other riders. And then, I could do the 1 minute and 5 minute efforts I needed to do to not get dropped on the climbs. I really, really loved that race. And I think anyone who participated it understood why, like organization aside, riding that course and the way that course raced, it had a rhythm to it. Paris to Ancaster has that same rhythm where it's like you're in a road race and there's a sign and you make a corner and for 5 minutes you're in a cyclocross race and then you come out on the other side back on the road. It's like a Paris-Roubaix rhythm where then it like regroups again. And so the cyclocross sections or the dirt sections are selections. They're like pave sections. And so they force everybody races to the pave and then things are bananas and then you come out the other side and you kind of regroup with a smaller group. And I'm sure that you did that, and it sounds like even though I haven't done any of your events, it sounds like it captures some of that feel, and it seemed like you were supporting all of your riders in the sense that whatever level of racing you wanted to do, like whatever level of seriousness or there's a race happening at the front, everybody's going hard to the limit of what they want to do. And the people at the front want to be competitive. They care about what place they get. It's a race. But it's like you kind of can bring the experience you want to it. I think from what I've heard about your events, that's why people enjoy them.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad you bring up Bat and Kill because that was definitely a formative event for me in terms of doing what we do with gravel. And maybe we push more gravel because the bike technology changes and things like that. But I think that's the type of gravel racing I would like to see is that hard racing in the front where it is tactical and it's interesting and just what you just described beautifully about your experience at Bat and Kill. But what also makes it financially viable for promoters is you can have somebody out who just wants to ride those things or who are racing in smaller groups throughout it and having different experiences. And it's not just the front of the race, which is the big critique on traditional road racing. And those sections that break it up are really interesting. Last year when we did the Ocean race, it's hard to find the right balance of it because sometimes you can make it just too muddy and too hilly, and we've done that many times where it just becomes this almost like this really long cyclocross race of like 2 or 3 hours where everybody's just sort of blown apart. But if you find the right balance of elevation and dry terrain and mud, you can't have that road race style where you're talking about piecing things together. It's kind of difficult to strike it. And last year we did it a little bit with the Ocean race where we had a couple guys, Curtis and Anthony and Mike Jones kind of in the front and a group chasing them. And the group just wasn't deep enough to catch them as far as having the talent that those guys have. It was a lot of good amateurs, but it wasn't guys at that level. But I was the only one kind of watching it from the truck. And I'm like, man, like this could be really cool racing to watch at the front if it was done, if you had 40 guys of that caliber all there.
Yeah, that's right. I think Paris to Ancaster is the best gravel race I've ever done. And if you haven't done it, I'd say, well, it's not going to happen this year, but that's where I was like, man, I could do more of these. This is wonderful. I would call it a road race with cyclocross sectors. That's how it rides. And so for a cyclocross racer who also races road, like is perfect, right? And most people are riding cyclocross bikes. I don't think you don't need a gravel bike per se. You actually need a cyclocross bike. Even a gravel bike would work, but a cyclocross bike works fine on the road. And those sections are cyclocrossy enough that you'd prefer to have a cyclocross bike than a gravel bike, a higher bottom bracket, the things that you want from a cross bike. And then on the road, yeah, you're tucked in. But it just had such a nice rhythm to it, and it's so well organized. And he gets 2,000 participants too. So he has a first wave of 100 people that are racing. Not everybody starts at once too. He starts people in waves.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people whose goal is to just complete the course. And then there's other people who are trying to win. And if you can do both of those things at your event, that's the appeal of gravel, really, is providing that experience. And I think that used to exist in road.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted, as I hearing you guys kind of talk some. I had a conversation last week about the state of road and so forth, because somebody had called me and said, man, because you've been doing this freaking forever, and like, where do you see things right now? And they were trying to do some promotional stuff, and it was kind of, as we were talking, and I've been thinking about this over the last week, so it's interesting you kind of bring some of those aspects up of, you start talking about things like Paris Ancaster, right? You have point to point, you have this kind of this epic nature, you have this adventure part of it, you have this completing a distance, but you also have longer distance. And I think, and I haven't put this all together, so I'm thinking out loud here a little bit on this podcast too. But I'm also going to take advantage of the fact that you go back a long ways as well, Adam, and you're thoughtful and measured. But think about the decline of road racing also came with the decline in distance. Remember, we used to race 100-mile road races a lot. Yeah. Back in the 80s. Like we had Empire State Games, and the qualifier was a 100-mile road race, right? And we did a time trial in the morning, a 10-mile time trial in the morning, a 100-mile road race. Then it got shortened to 80. Then it was 100K. And you see that the distance correlated shortening with fewer road riders. And I see gravel kind of like Dirty Kansas, 200 miles. You kind of have some of this epic nature to it. Paris Ancaster, a point to point with sectors. And you have this kind of this thing where people like, I want to complete this. And you have a certain amount of people say, I want to complete it, but I want to win. But it's still that epic nature. It's the distance. It's something that says, wow, that was really cool. And it was more than just, well, I went out and rode for an hour. Because a lot of people ride for an hour. And I think you see the decline in Ironman happen as, well, more people have completed Ironmans. It became less epic, right? So people are like, yeah, I know a buddy that completed an Ironman. It took him like freaking 20 hours, but he did it, right?
Yeah.
And so it takes away some of the accomplishment, which will tie into whole categories thing for me as well, but in upgrading. But I'll stay away from that for now. But just staying on the epic nature and what you're talking about is what's drawing people to gravel can, I think, also draw people to road. But we can't have 30-mile road races and expect that you're going to get the numbers back, because I think that's what was kind of drawing people to it. It was something that was cool. Racing 100 miles was freaking awesome, even if it was on a 20-mile circuit. It was hard to race 100 miles.
Yeah. I think it's funny because I think it goes both ways. So I also think that kept people out of it, right? So you're right. Like when we talked about this, I've described it as those of us who fell in love with traditional road racing, right? So you're in my group where we started racing in a certain era, and we fell in love with a certain version of the sport. And that's the version of the sport that we probably want to preserve most or bring back most. Not because we think it's superior, but it's because it's what we liked. It's because it's what we fell in love with. At the New England organizers meeting, in my presentation there, I said, the sport that I fell in love with doesn't exist anymore. And that's really hard to take. And I don't want to be a curmudgeon. I don't want to stop the change that's happening. I don't want to keep people from doing the things that they enjoy. That's what I'm saying. Like, if I sometimes sound critical of gravel, it's not because I don't enjoy it. It's that I'm looking at it through a certain lens. I'm not trying to keep it from happening. But do I have a thing that I love? Yeah, 100-mile road races, like 50-mile crits is the comparison, or 100K crits. Super week. Some of us are old enough to have done Super Week and done 17 days of 100K criteriums. There's no 100K criteriums anymore. You'd be lucky to do a 90-minute. USA Crits is often 90 minutes. Bless them for existing and keeping that going. But so what I think happens there is, yes, you're right. There were a group of people that were attracted to, let's call it the epicness, right? even if we all laugh
Right.
when we say epic.
Right.
Yes.
But the benefit there too is the sport was small and it was cheap to run, inexpensive to run those races. Entry fees were 10 or 15 or heaven forbid $25 to do a 100-mile road race. The downside is you can't do a 100-mile road race without help. If we want to be stereotypical about it, if you're a in that period, if you're a 20-something college grad from the Northeast, living your best life, your girlfriend's in the feed zone for you, like that model's dead. Like that's not the life that most of us are trying to live right now. And I think 100K road races for men anyway, let's just talk about men that take 2.5 hours. That's something you can do on 2 water bottles with no help. It's accessible. So I think accessibility is a boundary for me. And what I mean by that, even accessibility at the top of the sport. People aren't coming to those long road races anymore because lives are busier and the events are expensive, so they're racing less often. But I have sometimes been like, wait, I can't go to this race unless I get someone to feed me. It was a long time since I had been in that situation, right? In retirement. My wife's not going to come be in the feed zone for me. Like, why would I even ask her? I don't want her to have to do that. So that's why I think 100K for men, like a 2.5 hour race, it'd be something different for women where, like for me, I don't necessarily think equality is equal distance. I think equality is equal time. So, whatever the equivalent distance on a course would be to get the women a 2.5 hour race, similar to how long it would take the men. That's where I think practical equality exists. I don't think I'm segueing here, but making the distance the same so that the women end up having a race that's a half an hour longer, that's not equality to me.
Right. Yeah.
Race,
no, I
intensity,
definitely.
the same intensity for the same duration.
Right.
That's equality, and that means slightly different distances.
And it's going to develop the same quality of racing for everybody who's participating, for sure.
That's
I think you guys are right. Like the balance of it, like sometimes road races are too short, so they're boring. Especially when we talk about the other end of it. You guys are representing that elite end, but when we talk about bringing the new people into that sport as well, like nobody wants to go to a 20-mile road race and get dropped and go, well, yeah, I can ride 20 miles by myself. Who cares, right?
Yeah, or and pay $50. Yeah,
and pay $50, right?
Yeah.
But the gravel does the opposite too. They claim they're accessible, and then they put on a 200-mile race, and it's like no beginner's doing 15 hours on the freaking bike. I've been racing for a while. I'm not doing 15 hours. That's ridiculous. I don't want to ride my bike that long. So it's like it's that other balance of like, well, how can we bring new people in so it's hard and they feel like they accomplish something, and then it's still racy and fun for the elite level. And I think right now gravel races are way too long for that reason.
But here's why people are going for that, in my opinion. It's like a marathon. A marathon, people who are participating in marathons, and you got to look at the running boom to understand, I think, part of what's going on with gravel right now. You're absolutely right. No one can train correctly for a 12-hour event. And that's if you're fast, right? So if you go to Dirty Kansas and you can do it in 12 hours, you did well, right? That's a good ride. I have a junior who got 30th at Dirty Kansas last year, George Peepgrass. So he was 16. I don't even think he had turned 17 yet. He might have just turned 17. He was the first junior finisher, and he the people that he beat were phenomenal. And he did that while in school. He I don't think he did more than 12 hours a week to get ready for he did it in 12 hours for a 12-hour race. Now, that's not possible. You actually can't train for that. You can't prepare for that effectively. You can't be properly prepared. And so the very nature of the event is that in advance that you are going to go beyond your current capabilities in order to complete it. And then you kind of, there's this idea of like you find out what you're made of or what you're capable of in that space where you're well over your preparedness in the competition. So I think that is the appeal. And that kind of goes back to what Todd was saying about the 100-mile road races having that same, like, can I do this? Like, what happens to me if I put myself in this circumstance? So, and that's marathoning is that it's like this accessible epicness. Let's call it.
Yeah, but I always appreciated, and one of the things that drew me into cycling in my late 20s after grad school, as opposed to running, where I was kind of not, I didn't really enjoy running to begin with. But one of the things that I liked about cycling, as opposed to those, even triathlon, my wife was doing that at the time when I kind of discovered some of this, was that rather than racing like a couple of times a year at most to hit these really long epic challenges and training a lot in between, road racing was like, I could just go hit a road race every weekend and a couple, and I'm competing a lot and I'm not training a lot, and it's more social in that respect, and it's shorter, and I always appreciate that about road racing, and I think we're losing that end a little bit. We still have it in cross, which is awesome, and I'm glad that it's still there in cross.
Yeah, it's the cost of events, I think, that hurts that for sure. Like, and I don't know if it's people, just the cost of the events or people's eyes getting busier, but you're right. Like, in my generation, it was about the racing, and I raced 80 times a year. And now people race 10 times a year. Maybe someone who races a lot races 20 times a year. So I think that's in part because people focus more on training. It's in part because the events are more expensive. You know, racing 80, how do you race 80 times a year if it's $50 a pop? Or
Right.
and you see with gravel races, the entry fees are astronomical. They're $150, and what are you getting for 100 or $150? What is it that you're paying for? That's one of my criticisms, or one of my questions. Are you paying for the meal afterwards? Is that, and I'm not even being like sarcastic or critical, like, is that part of the appeal for folks? Because like, that seems expensive to me for a meal.
Mhm.
And if there's no marshaling and no signage, and you're paying for the, like, I guess someone created a course for you. Yeah, so I guess I always want to ask people, what are you getting for your money? Do you know what is it? Is it just the fear of missing out that you're paying for? Because I think that started to happen at Bat and Kill as well. I think that was part of Bat and Kill's popularity, was the word of mouth aspect, and that's when their entry fees started going up. And then people did it a couple of times, and they actually had bad experiences because of the organization, and then they stopped going and told other people that they were going to stop going, and that's how that event started to go down. I think you might see some of that same bubble burst with gravel, but I just want to know what people are getting for their $100 or $150 entry fee.
Yeah, I think that getting what you view as product value, I think is an important aspect of it. I think there's and this is something that like I said, I was thinking about more in the last week, and but on and off as well. What are the common threads, and how are those common threads gonna cross here? No pun intended, but gonna cross here in late season, as we've basically wiped out the first half of the calendar, where we would typically have pro road was spring classics. Those will probably come back, and because they just have tradition in Europe. But as far as the U.S. side, with gravel being a spring kind of discipline, being completely vaporized now, you have a lot of the early crit season. Somerville's gone, and obviously Winston-Salem's going to move to fall, and so you have some of these movements that are going to happen. It's going to be interesting to see how all these common threads are people looking for more of the epic nature? Are they looking for what is it? Those things. What is that value that they're looking for from the event? Is it, like you said, are they looking for that experience in the meal and some of these kinds of things? Are they looking for the camaraderie? Are they looking for the story that they can tell after? I think some of those things maybe this whole hiatus for a couple of months and kind of jamming everything together, maybe it starts to filter some of that through, and we kind of start seeing like, okay, well, when they're laid over the top of each other, what do people want most? What are they really looking for?
Yeah, well, and as someone who likes traditional, maybe still prefers traditional road and cyclocross as my primary interest or discipline, and as an organizer of an event, how do I bring that to the cyclocross event that I organize? How can I want to provide that same experience. That's always been my goal at my events. Why I try to keep my entry fees low and things accessible and create an atmosphere. I want it to be an event. I want people to come and stick around for the whole day and feel a sense of community. And I remember before my kid was born, or maybe just after he was born, one day I was sitting at my tent at my race, and I noticed the children of a bunch of my masters, the parents who were about my age, who'd had kids 10 years before me, their kids have all come up in my races. And I pay attention to that now even more, obviously, because I'm a parent, but I was paying attention to it anyway because they were bringing their families. But I saw all these kids playing together in the field at Northampton between races, and I recognized all the kids. I knew who their parents were, but I saw them just partying in the grass together. I don't know if they were like throwing a football around or what they were doing. They were in their kit. They had all raced in the morning, but they were with their friends, their race friends, their bike race friends who lived all in different places over New England, but they got together every weekend to essentially visit with their friends. And it really moved me because I was like, shit, I created this. Like I inadvertently created this, the opportunity for this to take place. And I was always working on building community, but seeing the kids participate in it and seeing how my customers had adapted kind of to what, like they had done something with the event, taken it to a place that I hadn't intended. But when I saw it, I realized how valuable it was. And I want to really focus on that and continue to build that. And of course, being a parent changes your perspective. You think you're paying attention and that you understand. And of course, when you're finally a parent, you understand in this inherent way
Right.
that I think you can't. And that doesn't mean to be dismissive of people without kids, because I obviously was a person without kids too. But yeah, there's a perspective shift that happens that's not necessarily more valuable, but it is still a shift.
Sure. You just can't
yeah.
get it any other way. It's just the way it is. It's not a
You
value.
you can observe and you can understand and you can respond accordingly, but yeah, there's something inside you that shifts. And anyway, I don't like placing lots of value on that because I think it diminishes the experience of people who don't have kids, and I don't think I don't personally feel that way. And I'm not a better person or because I happen to have a kid. I might be a worse person. But I think the key
there are those moments, right?
Yeah, but this is why, again, like if I sometimes sound like I'm complaining about gravel, it's just one of the complaints I have is all the goals that these new gravel organizers have who want to act like they're fixing something or saving something. I'm just my race is going to be 30 years old this year. I started putting it on when I was 19. It's the 30th edition. I'm at the point in my career when I'd be like, hey man, I did something right. It's like, I have a right to speak up from my experience and act like I know what I'm talking about because I actually have a track record, and I want to start being, I want to stick up for myself a little bit more and point to my accomplishments and say like, hey, I have some authority here that I've earned. You can act like you've got all the new ideas or you're going to fix everything. But I've been here for 30 years and my race is still successful. And it was the biggest cyclocross race in the Northeast. And of course, there were some single day gravel events that were bigger. And I see that. I see what they're doing. I want to see why they're bringing people in. And I want my event to provide the same thing. And I believe that it can. I guess that's my point. Traditional racing, traditional road, USA Cycling sanctioned racing can recapture that spirit if the organizers are paying attention. If you want to provide that experience with your event, and it's not that gravel is going to save everything. It's that those of us who have been participating in and organizing traditional races need to rethink what we're doing if you're not providing that experience to people through criteriums or road racing or cyclocross. I absolutely think you can do it.
Yeah, and I think along with that, just to kind of maybe close the loop on a little bit of that is, we talk about, the rider experience and people saying, they go to an event and, it's welcoming, because gravel's more welcoming and road is so exclusion. It's, look around because it's the same guys. It's the same. So if you want it to be different, be the change. Then when you're at a criterium, don't be standoffish and being the person you don't want to be. Then it's like, be the guy that showed up to the gravel race or the cross race, or it's like, because it's the same guys that are doing the multiple disciplines. So if you feel like, well, the vibe here isn't, well, then be different. And I always refer back to my good friend John DeShaw, and John was very, very welcoming to so many people.
He was a sweetheart. He really was a sweetheart.
Yeah, and he was that change. He didn't want that environment at a road race or criterium, and he would talk to people and welcome people and take a minute, And it's like, so when people feel like, man, gravel's got the vibe I want because it's welcoming and people are friendly. Well, then be friendly.
Yeah,
Then
right.
be friendly at any event. And I think we can recapture a lot.
Well, so I think when you think about road races, like sometimes I think the Fondo model is the one that can also recreate that, like, because there's nothing worse than getting dropped in a road race. I think that is a real problem that we have with traditional racing. If you go to a crit and you get dropped, that's not a positive experience. If you go to a road race, you get dropped, that's not a positive experience. You go to a gravel race and you get dropped, you're with 30 other people and you're having a great time. So how do we provide that experience? And I think that used to happen on group rides. That's what clubs provided. That experience happened at a different place. And so you didn't start racing without having gained a bunch of experience at the club level. And so when clubs died, a tier of the sport died. And instead of clubs, you just get the weeknight free-for-all group ride where nobody waits and nobody teaches you anything. And it's not very welcoming. So yeah, we've done it to ourselves, right? And I think people got more, I think in the 90s and the 2000s, like people got more focused on their own participation rather than the community. And when the community died, the barriers to entry went up. And in a lot of ways, sometimes it feels like only self-interested, highly performing or self-interested, capable people were the ones who survived in bike racing. And so then it turned into a bunch of dicks. So that part's true, like that criticism of gravel that part's true. Right. But I also have a problem with that. And I also want to fix that. Because again, it goes back to the sport that I fell in love with doesn't exist anymore.
And the flip side of that is, like you said, the sport you fell in love with, it's contingent on, like, that's the game you're playing, is people get dropped. There's tactics, right? So if we start to eliminate that, we're just not playing the same game anymore. Like, it's like
Fondos can do that though, right? Yeah, well, so like the first year we organized the Tour of the Hill Towns, the very first year we ran that race, we weren't sure if it was viable, and we weren't sure what kind of turnout we were going to get. So before we even knew what the word Fondo was, we ran it as a mass start event. We split all the categories up at the finish, but we had 250 people, and we ran it as one start. And it was a Fondo. We didn't know what Fondos were, but we ran a Fondo, and I still think it was the best year of the event because it was awesome. And you ended up riding with people of similar ability to you, regardless of their category or their sex. And that's a good racing experience. And that's the racing experience you get at gravel events where, you can be competitive at whatever level you're at and not be alone, be surrounded by other people at your ability level. And so, we can talk about the problems with the USA Cycling categorization system, especially as fields have gotten smaller again. They no longer work, and that's why they're getting revised right now, and maybe that can help too. We just need to, we focus so much on chopping the categories up by age that we don't focus enough on, as fields get smaller again, because there are fewer participants, we need to figure out how to group people of similar ability levels together to get fields of critical sizes to actually provide the bike racing experience that people can enjoy. Like, I coached a woman who lived in Tucson, and when she made it up to Cat 3 or Cat 2, the racing in Arizona for her was she'd show up and there'd be between 6 and 10 other women. That's not bike racing.
Right.
And so her experience was very different than what was happening there were, 30 to 50 women fields happening here in New England at the same time. So I had her come here to experience that, to get to do that kind of race. But those are different sports. Like,
right, exactly. And I always thought the category system, when I first came to the sport, I always thought that was really appealing because you're with people who are of similar ability, not just a similar age. Because I think you two would both be in a slightly different age group than me, not by a lot, but enough if we were doing age groups, right? and in an older age group, but both of you guys are going to kick my ass. Like it's not even comparable. So why are we splitting it up that way, right? Like it should be based on that ability. And I always thought USA Cycling's biggest advantage was that they had that. But I think you're completely correct. It has to evolve because it's not moved forward where we
Right.
kept them competitive and likability.
Yeah, the sport grew, and so we needed like increased category capacity, and so like we created Cat 5 or whatever. But then we started having upgrade problems, and then the sport started to shrink. And what we're left with right now is definitely not. It is getting changed, so I hope it's getting fixed. But it's created a clog. People can't upgrade. They can't. The beginner categories are the ones that are most full, but then that's also where the turnover is the most high, and so the fields are getting smaller in the Cat 3s and the 1s and 2s. And man, it's a whole separate podcast to talk about women's fields and the challenges that that female bike racers are facing right now. Like we couldn't even, that's a whole other, you can't even talk about those things together because it's a separate set of challenges. But
yeah, for sure. And one thing you see up at Milton, because I'm up there a lot, especially because they're running a really fantastic winter racing program almost every weekend. But they've taken their Saturday race programs, and it's A, B, and C, D racing, and it doesn't matter male, female, age, whatever. You're just seeded by your ability, and it's made the women. I think for them, it makes a better race experience for the most part because nobody's been down against the women being, because it's completely ability based. So if you're racing B, you're racing B.
As things get smaller, as fields get smaller, that ends up being what you have to do to get a critical mass of riders in a field. I don't think that's, it's not ideal, and you wanna give people the fields they want to race in, but I mean, I'll say too, like one of the challenges as a race organizer is, do you orient your event around the customers that exist or the customers that don't? And what I mean by that is, if you're making money off entry fees, you're going to have to run a bunch of masters men's categories to capture that business that exists. But if you do that, if you have a limited race day schedule and you do that at the expense of, let's say, juniors or reasonable women's categories, and you don't run those categories, let's say with the women especially, you don't run them because there aren't that many women right now. Like even if you can, this is funny that people will say, well, the women don't show up, but people don't forget that there actually aren't any. It's not just that they don't show up. Sometimes they show up in a higher percentage than the men, but there just aren't that many female bike racers right now. Well, why aren't there female bike racers right now? Because there are shitty opportunities for women's bike racing right now. So if you reduce those opportunities, you are now contributing to that cycle and the death of that category. And before you know it, like all we're going to have left in traditional road racing is going to be 40, 50, and 60 plus men. That's going to be the sport. So this is why it's a tough spot to be in as an organizer, because can you afford? People are trying to make economic decisions about parity and also about development. So for me as a race organizer, I'm willing to do some activism with my event. And I think that if I want the women's side of the sport to grow, then I can't cut those races. Then I can't reduce those races. I can't deprioritize those races because I want those categories to come back. I have to provide space for that field to come back. And so I leave space for it. Even if it costs me a little bit in the entry fees I might have gotten if I chopped up my masters into a bunch more subcategories.
Yeah, there's always big balances. So and it's and you know well the challenges having promoted for a long time. I think going back to your comments about you've put on a race for 30 years. Longevity does give you authority. I think longevity of success, not longevity of crap. Because I've had plenty of people say they've been doing things a long time, and I'm like, yeah, but you're still messed up, and you've just been doing it wrong for a long time.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's a fair criticism, and I don't mind if people you say that to me too, like, well, maybe you could be doing better if you didn't keep doing it this way. Like I try like I said, I don't want to be a total curmudgeon. I want to improve what I do, and I want to change with the sport, and I want to learn from new perspectives. Or also, I think you get stuck in your ways, or you forget things. You have a hard time thinking outside of what's worked for you, and I don't want to. I certainly don't want to end up in that position either. I'm trying to work really hard to still be flexible and allow the kids to push me a little bit to change my thinking.
Yeah, I think that's always an important thing. Is we always all want to grow, and sometimes it means like, yeah, this has been successful, but maybe the conditions. I think kind of going back to what we said some before is your views are shaped by different things, but being able to adapt and say, well, I have new information. And maybe things are a little different, and I make some changes, and maybe they're good changes based on the circumstances. What was good for making a 100-mile road race maybe doesn't work now, but I can do a really great 100K or 70-mile road race, and maybe that's the adaptations we all need to look at. So, but man, we could probably, well, we could branch off to probably 4 or 5 other discussions.
Well, I was
And
thinking like to tie the thing that I was just thinking as like the tie up because I figured we were getting close is it even happened in this call. Like I often find myself in this situation where I appear to be really critical of everything all the time, or I'm always complaining, or I'm angry, or whatever. And I hope it came out a little bit in this call that what I really care about is doing the best job possible and about people. And so what I spend all my energy on is trying to make people happy and worrying about their well-being and how they're doing and making connections. And that's what gets me out of bed every morning. I push myself really hard to listen to people and to try to make them happy and to sort of give them what they want and build community. And I'm very critical of myself. And so it's not just always criticism, it's analysis. Sometimes I'm doing analysis of circumstances. That does not mean to be critical of individual people, but it's very hard to make that clear. It's hard to show people that. And so even in this call, like there's a lot of bad things happening right now. And so of course that's what we're talking about, right? We're doing a lot of criticism right now. But for me, the goal is to be constructive. The goal is to make things better, and to make things less miserable, to reduce suffering, like to bring it back to Buddhism. Like, man, everything's miserable. Like maybe bikes happen to be the thing that I've turned out to be a quote unquote expert in. It's what I have to offer the world. So I want people to make their time on the planet a little more enjoyable through the expertise that I've acquired in bikes. And if I can do that, then I'll have a reason to get out of bed in the morning beyond my child and my wife.
Appreciate what you just said about being critical and analysis and that balance there. I experience much of the same thing, not necessarily in cycling, but like in my job and things like that. I think where I'm very similar. But what I've learned from you, even just through this call, is you have a great way of balancing the empathy with that criticism. And I think that's hard for some people to wrap their mind around, that you can be critical and analytical, but also be extremely empathetic. And I really think it came out a lot here. I hope it did. It certainly did for me. And I really appreciate that. And I've learned a lot from you in that regard.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I think it doesn't always come across on Twitter, and sometimes that's where people are getting their engagement with me. And half the time I'm telling jokes and being a dick on purpose, and I say things that I think are ridiculous that I assume everybody else notices. But then they think I believe what I'm saying, and I'm like, no, guys, the reason that sounded ridiculous is because it's ridiculous. That's the joke. But that fails all the. I get that so wrong all the time. And people think I'm a much bigger dick than I actually am.
Well, I always say, when we get through this pandemic time, that maybe people will value face-to-face more. And I've always enjoyed any of our face-to-face discussions, whether it's been meeting up, riding bikes, or whatever it is. And I always think there's clarity in actually talking to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, thanks, guys.